All right, welcome to Relatively Weird, the podcast where a couple of cousins get together and talk about everything weird. I'm Kim.
And I'm not Kim. I'm Jilli.
We are going to get into it. So I have an old story for you today.
Oh my god, no way.
This is a story that I feel like has been covered places, which I don't love to do, but it's interesting. I know it's been on a couple of TV shows, but so maybe you've heard of it, but this is about the Bender family.
The Bloody Benders?
The Bloody Benders.
Okay. Time Suck did this.
Okay.
I don't remember a whole lot of it.
Okay.
So,
All right.
your take.
Let's do it. So between May of 1871 and December of 1872, at least 11 people went missing from the area of the Osage Township in Labette County, Kansas. So at this time in our history, people were heading to destinations out west to try to settle and start lives, and so they could kind of claim land.
Yeah.
Because the country wanted to build up.
Expand.
Yes. So they were encouraging people to move out there. They were giving them land to get started, and you needed to work it. So the Bender family were one of around 5 families who landed in Osage Township to start their homesteading journey. So John Sr. and John Jr. arrived first in October of 1870. The men claimed 160 acres of land. Great.
How do you claim that?
That's how you went out
Just
and
mow
you.
it? Or like...
No, they like registered and they were like, "Here's this is yours now."
Okay.
So 160 acres of land. Now the land was next to the Great Osage Trail, which was the only road in the area that led further west. Just keep that in mind.
Okay. So a lot of traffic coming through.
Yeah. After a cabin and several outbuildings were erected, the rest of the family showed up around a year later. It's usually how I roll too. Like, get it done, and then I'll come. I don't want to
No,
do
I
it
feel
anymore.
like that was pretty common though. They
Well,
were
yeah.
like, you guys, yeah.
You're the men, because the rest of the family were 2 women.
Yeah.
So at that point, they added a vegetable garden and an orchard. And at this point, sounds lovely.
Orchards take a long time.
160 acres in Kansas.
Yeah.
Growing your own stuff. So I'm going to introduce you to the Benders. Now, bear in mind, it kind of sounds like they would introduce themselves with different names here and there.
I believe that sounds familiar,
Yeah.
yes.
Sometimes just the last name was different. Sometimes the first name was different. But for our purposes, at this point, we're going to go with the most well-known names. So John Sr. was around 60 years old. Elvira, or sometimes Elmira,
Oh.
was around 55. And the two apparently didn't speak very good English. And Elvira was specifically remembered as being very unfriendly. One person who was interviewed, there were a lot of really old articles available on this, so that was pretty cool. Actually called her a she-devil.
Oh.
Though, like,
Why,
I don't know.
though?
She was just mean. She was mean
Do
to
you
people.
think that people would write and be like, Kim and Jilli? Like, ugh.
I honestly, when I'm 55, if I, which is so long from now, if I, wow, own 160 acres of land and I'm just working the land, I would rather people think me
Yeah,
rude.
leave me alone.
Just, yeah. I mean, that wasn't her goal, but she
Wait.
probably just couldn't help it.
You said they didn't speak English. What did they speak?
People are unclear. on
Okay.
that. They, as a matter of fact, said, like, John Jr. Sr. would just kind of, like, mumble, like, inaudibly sometimes.
I was
and
thinking they were like totally different language.
it sounds like most people thought that they were German.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So, John Jr., he was around 25 years old. He was supposedly good looking, but I mean, I think that depends on who you ask, because I would see Kate was pretty. Oh, she was weird looking. They didn't say weird, but
Do you have pictures that you're going to put up?
yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah. They're drawings.
Oh, well.
But yeah.
Yeah.
John Jr. was a handsome fella. He was said to have a German accent, but he spoke very good English. And several places mentioned his laugh. And it seemed like he would just sort of unexpectedly and kind of inappropriately break out in laughter.
Like the Joker.
Yeah. One person likened him to a hyena.
Oh, okay.
Which seems rude. And finally, there was Kate. She was 23 years old, and she was the daughter of the family. Or John Jr.'s common law wife.
Or both, maybe?
So, in just a second, you'll learn why that isn't so unlikely for her to be.
Okay.
So, people said Kate had almost no accent at all, and she was quite attractive. And she sold herself as a psychic and a healer. She conducted seances. She spoke publicly about things like spirituality. And she was even teaching people about the idea of free love. In the 1870s.
I was going to say, when was this?
Yes.
She was 100 years before her time.
Yeah. So at the time you're like, why are you people not running this one? Like, you would just think that people would, I don't know.
That's like not acceptable at that
Persecute her.
time. Yeah.
She was said to have told one crowd that she and her brother had relations because why shouldn't they if that's what they wanted to do?
Cersei.
So, hence why maybe people thought she was his common law wife.
Ew.
So, the cabin that was on the 160 acres, they cleverly modified it to assist with making some money. So, they split the cabin into two sections. The front was set up as a store, and the rear was used as the family's living area. It was really just separated by like a heavy curtain.
Okay.
The store sold dry goods, and they had a kitchen and a table set up if travelers needed food. They would also sometimes offer to have them stay the night. So remember, they're basically on the only road in the area that continues further west. So it's kind of the perfect location to offer that service.
Yeah.
And apparently, Kate's reputation actually helped fuel business. So
was
people
that
had heard about her, and
that was acceptable then? Maybe like if you're like further away from society, people don't really care.
I don't necessarily know that it was acceptable. I think it was
Fun.
interesting, kind of an anomaly, something you gawk at more than like, oh my God, you should hear what this woman says. Women don't talk like this.
Women don't talk.
Well, apparently Elvira talks, and she's rude about it. So, around this time, an inordinate amount of people, mostly men, had gone missing or had been found dead. So this is a very quick list.
Found dead.
Yes.
Found dead where?
Listen.
Okay.
So in May of 1871, Jones, that's all, just Jones, apparently everybody knew him as Jones,
Jonesy,
was found dead in Drum Creek. His throat had been cut, and he had a head wound.
where is this creek in relation to? You don't know. Okay.
I think it is either on the land or it borders the land.
Okay.
In February of 1872, 2 more men were found, and they were never identified, and they both had the same cause of death as Jones. December of 1872 was a rough time. Ben Brown went missing. W.F. McCrawdy went missing, along with his wagon and his horses. Henry Mackenzie, in the process of moving from Independence, Kansas, to Indiana, went missing, also along with his horses. Johnny Boyle went missing with his horse. George Longcourt and his daughter both went missing. Now, her age ranges from 18 months to 8 years old, depending on the source. 1800s journalism is
that's like was it Joe Show?
Yeah,
it was either 12 or 2.
It could have been nobody. So This is not funny. So anyway, so him and his daughter, young, either way, either very, very young or young, went missing. His wife and son had died, and it was believed that he was heading to move in with his parents.
So does anyone make it past this place? Like, you know what I mean?
I don't know what you're talking about yet.
Okay.
John Geary, Red Smith, and Abigail Roberts all go missing. Now, that was all in just December of 1872.
Where are they putting them all?
You'll find out. In May of 1873, this is kind of the turning point. They fuck with the wrong person, basically. Dr. William York had gone looking for George Longcore because he never made it to his parents' house. And while he was looking, he went missing. Oh, God. So he never made it home. No. Dr. York's brothers knew that he had been headed to Independence, so they put together a group of like 50 men to help search for William.
Had to be. Otherwise, if you're like 1 or 2 or 3, you're gone.
Oh, right. Exactly. At least now you stand a chance.
Yeah.
So they talked to everyone they passed and approached all of the homesteads along the way. One of the brothers, Colonel Alexander York, got to the Benders Inn on March 28th, 1873. So the Benders said that William had stayed there, but they didn't know what happened after that. Maybe, he could have left and had an issue with some Native Americans, which is not what I'm sure they called them.
Uh-huh.
And so, it's Kansas in 1870. All right, maybe it's feasible. But Alexander's like, okay, we'll see.
But they've heard of the other people missing too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Alexander returned to the house on April 3rd. So that's like 5 days later. And he returned because he had heard that a woman had been threatened by Elvira. And so when he confronted her, Elvira acted like she couldn't understand what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
But her kids were like, no, that's not, she's lying. That didn't happen. So Alexander pressed further, and Elvira flipped her shit and kicked him out of the house. So apparently she did understand what he was saying.
Yeah, right. Do speak English.
On his way out, Kate approached Alexander and offered to use her psychic abilities to help him find William if he returned alone the next night. He did not do that. I think he felt comfortable that was not in his best interest.
No.
But a community meeting was held regarding the number of missing people in the area.
Finally.
Yeah. So the locals decided to get a search warrant for all of the homesteads in the area of Drum Creek and Big Hill Creek. I don't know if you can do that sort of thing anymore. I don't think you could just say, just this vast expanse of houses, just all of them.
Right. Can you?
I don't think so.
Like even
because you don't have a valid to get a search warrant. You have to have enough evidence.
Oh, that you think?
Yeah, for it to be likely that they're involved. So no, this is just they are in the area, so we're searching them. I don't think they had to go very far with that because 3 days later, the Benders were gone. Someone was going by the house and realized it was abandoned.
Wow.
The animals had been left behind, but they looked like they had been left unfed.
Oh.
So a group of volunteers, one source said numbering in the hundreds, like a lot to me, but searched the property. The cabin was empty. The animals had obviously, like I said, been left behind. Blood was discovered in a room under a trap door in the bedroom. They dug under the cabin and found nothing. As a matter of fact, they moved the cabin too.
Wait, so, I'm sorry. You said that they saw blood, and then they found nothing. So
it was just blood.
Okay.
It had dripped.
Okay.
So beyond that, they just...
I mean, you are on like a farm.
Right. Then they noticed that the soil in both the orchard and the veggie garden had been recently disturbed. This is where they found most of the missing people.
Aha.
So a lot of them were in the orchard. One was in the well. They found limbs like body parts for people that they're not even really sure. There were people who were never identified. So there's like 11 named people, I believe, and they're not even sure if that's everybody. So everybody had been killed the same way, with the exception of the little girl. She didn't have any injuries, so they think she was either strangled or suffocated.
Yeah.
After the story broke, because, you know, news just spreads like wildfire, even in the 1800s, around 3,000 people came to the area to see the farm, and the cabin was actually raided by people looking for a piece of the story.
Oh, wow.
So let's talk about the Benders, the Benders MO.
Yeah.
So obviously, a guest would come to the inn, and they'd be like, you want some food? You want a place to stay tonight? They invited the guest to sit in a certain seat, and they always made it like, oh, this is like your guest tonight. This is the best seat in the house, blah, blah, blah. The seat was the closest to the curtain that separated the two sections of the house, and it also happened to be over a trapdoor.
Oh, okay.
So Kate would usually be talking to them, you know, charming them, I'm sure. And one of the men, either junior or senior, would come up behind the curtain and use a hammer to hit them in the head. This would stun them, hopefully knock them out, and Kate or Elvira would then slit their throat.
Wow.
Then the body was dropped through the trapdoor. They would remove anything of value. A lot of money was stolen. They were giving some amounts. Now, I don't know how they knew exactly how much money these people were supposed to have on them, / how much the Benders took, but there were actual dollar amounts next to the people. It was kind of weird. One person really had the equivalent, today's equivalent of like $66,000 on him at the time. Then, of course, the bodies were buried or discarded, like left in the creek, put in the well. And the reason they kind of know this for sure, I'm sure you can look at the physical layout of the cabin and be like, chances are this is what happened. But there were several witnesses who actually had experiences where they kind of seemed to barely make it out.
Oh my God.
And so people also said that there were bullet holes in the side of the cabin. And it seemed that perhaps people who had maybe been hit in the head, but they didn't get them good enough, and they tried to fight back and like ran away. And
why would it take so long to be like, it was totally them, I escaped? Like,
because I think these are people who are just moving through, and so they're like petrified.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to get away at that point. They probably don't know anybody in town.
Go back home. Go the opposite way.
I don't know.
Wow.
So now, after the fact, so 12 miles north of the cabin, investigators found the wagon and the horse team that belonged to the Benders. Again, rude to just leave your animals like that. According to witness statements, the whole family got on a train to Humboldt, Kansas. But John Jr. and Kate left before getting there and took a different train to the end of the line in Texas. After getting off that train, they headed towards the New Mexico border. Now, this area was notoriously violent. It was figure West Texas to New Mexico at that time frame.
New Mexico wasn't a part of us yet, right? New Mexico wasn't New Mexico, was it?
Okay, so it was New Mexico territory, which was I'm quoting this. These are not my words, was an organized, incorporated territory of the United States.
Okay. So like outlaws
as early as
and
1850.
Stuff? Is that what you're talking about?
So yeah, there were a lot of outlaws. I think there were a lot of Native Americans that were probably pretty hostile to, well,
I mean, you push people.
Yeah. So anyway, I think basically what they said is like the pursuit kind of ended there. There was no lawman, quote unquote lawman, who was willing to go there
Yeah.
Because a lot of them, if they did venture in there, they didn't come back.
It's a different sort of problem.
Yes. So John Sr. and Elvira made it to Humboldt, but they kept going. People think that they went on to St. Louis. Some sources say that John Sr. and Elvira actually did meet up with the kids before moving west from Texas to New Mexico, so that they may have actually traveled that way, all four of them. But again, this sort of goes to the fact that, like, anybody could say that guy looked like
Journalism.
what I've heard, what I've heard John Jr. looked like, and I think I saw him, like...
Right.
So, despite many stories from vigilantes claiming to have found and or killed the Benders, no one had ever been positively ID'd. 12 men were arrested for helping the Benders dispose of the victims' possessions. So, that's how they got rid of people's horses. They would sell them for money. They would sell their wagons for money. They would, and to do it discreetly, I guess, these men needed to assist. You needed somebody, a contact, to do it.
So there were at least 12 people who knew.
I guess they should have known enough. Yeah.
Okay.
So 2 women were actually arrested in 1889, and they were reported by the daughter of a victim, like a known Bender victim, because of a dream she had.
All right.
So, and it's weird because at one point, like, the younger of the 2 women was like, well, yeah, she's Elvira, but I'm not Kate. And then they were like, well, no, neither of us is a Bender. It was just, like, it was very...
That's really weird.
It was very strange.
Maybe they were criminals, but they weren't the right
They
criminals.
were definitely criminals. Yeah. They were originally arrested for larceny, and then they were let go.
Why would you pretend to be a different criminal?
I know.
Or not.
Or she was trying to say, like, I'll turn over on Elvira.
Yeah, sure.
If you let me go. But regardless, there wasn't enough solid evidence. I mean, they were using, like, tintype photographs to try to ID these people.
Weird.
And it's 1889 at this point. You're talking about 17 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Elvira was 55.
Right.
So the women were let go for that particular crime. I don't know. Maybe they went back to jail later. So there was a Bender Museum in Cherryvale, Kansas from 1967 to 1978. I don't know how I feel about it. The town built a fire department there. They needed the spot for their fire department. And originally there was talk of moving the museum, but the town was like, no, that's gross. We don't need a museum for the Benders.
Oh, yeah.
And so rather than relocate the museum, the items were all moved to the Cherryvale Museum. And there is actually a marker in a rest area near Cherryvale with the Bender story about the victims. And there's pictures, and I can use it on Instagram, of, like, they're called the Bender Mounds. And they look like hills, but they're supposedly where some of the people were buried. Yeah. So,
wow.
I mean, realistically, unless these people were eventually arrested for something else.
Yes, they never.
Because how simple, like you said,
just
I got on a train, and where the fuck did I go? You don't know where I went.
Yeah.
There's no record of me buying a ticket.
Nobody gets their picture taken, really.
Right. So that's them. I mean,
that's such a, like, obviously it really happened, but also like a horror film trope. Like, you're just, passing, oh, look at these nice people, like, and then they're just a little bit weird, and then no one ever comes back. Like,
well, right. And the number of people, and at the time, it must have been dangerous enough that some of these people's families were probably just like, well,
there's a reason they didn't go with them. Like,
right.
Okay, you do the dangerous part, and then when it's all settled, I'll come.
One of the 11-ish people's family came looking for them. Only one.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
I mean, but also, though, people might not have had the means to do that.
Right.
You know?
And
they probably didn't, actually.
I also think for some people moving west was maybe they had lost everything else where they were, and this was a new opportunity for them, so people didn't even know.
They knew that there were risks.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's so creepy. If you think about it, like, just picturing it, like, they had a trapdoor and everything.
The story, right. Yeah. You're like, did you plan this from the beginning? There were rumors that Elvira had actually been married several times before, and that she had murdered every one of her husbands, but people didn't like her. They thought she was mean. I mean, she's not. I'm not saying they should have liked her, but you're gonna. I don't know. You're gonna say that.
They're all creepy.
And then there's like maybe those two kids were like, Kate was actually her fourth daughter. So it's so tricky because you're like, nobody knows what. Oh, their neighbor said. Oh, and who is he?
Right. Well, like I said to you, there's always. I was telling Kim earlier. You have like this lore about your neighbors. Let's be honest. You don't know who your neighbors are usually nowadays, and you're just like, so you make stuff up, and then it becomes canon.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh my god, that lady murdered all of her husbands.
Right?
Can you imagine that? You're like, she did.
Wow.
So that is the Bloody Benders. Hopefully,
yeah. I didn't really remember a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, I had. So apparently, there's a supernatural episode.
There is?
Is
it later in
their last name is the Benders, but their first names are all different. Huh. But there's been movies. I mean, it is such like you said,
horror movie.
You're like, oh my god, I'm on this trip. I have so far to go.
Yep.
Oh look, there's this lovely cabin. These people seem super nice.
Yeah, I'm sure that at least like Elvira could like turn on the charm if she wanted to, or at least Kate, who was like this.
Oh, Kate for sure.
Girl, and like, come on in,
free love.
Yeah.
I'm sure Elvira just kept her mouth shut. She probably just like cooked.
Yeah. Yeah, you have like the charmer, and then the people who would do like. Although you said that she would slit people's throats too, either her or Elvira.
Yeah. Yeah, the women did that part.
Creepy.
Blech. And you're just so sad.
It is sad.
And that, like, ballsy. And I wish I had a different word for that, because that sounds almost like I'm impressed by it. But I more so mean, I can't believe she would have killed that other brother if he'd been.
Oh, yeah.
But everybody would have known. It was at that point, everybody would have known.
Right.
So I don't think they cared at all. They probably knew it was a matter of time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think they probably knew. They probably did have an escape plan at that point.
And actually, some people said that John, either of the Johns, was actually at that community meeting where they were talking about, and so
yeah,
probably was like,
yeah,
we gotta go. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Old-timey creepy.
I know. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relatively weirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week.